This is my 1992 Mitsubishi GTO, but this car hasn't always looked like this. And back in 2021 when I first found this car, it was a day away from becoming this. And I don't know what it is about the GTOs, whether it's the pop-up headlights, the classic boaty type styling, or even the fact that if you look at it from the front, it has such a nice hourglass body design. But when I first saw the Mitsubishi GTO, I was at a car meet, I saw it and I didn't know what it was, so when I started to look into them, I just kind of fell in love with the car. And like I said, this was a day away from looking like that, and I thought, I can't let that happen to this car. So at the time, with my inexperience, I thought it'd be a good idea to take on this car and try and save it, thinking it only needed a few bits, but boy was I wrong. And this car looks fantastic as it is now, but it's took me 4 long years to get it to that point. So this is essentially the build of the GTO from start to finish, from when I started recording it, because the first YouTube videos I ever did was the engine build on the GTO, so that's where we'll have to start, because I haven't really got much from before then, but this is the GTO build from start to finish, and I hope you enjoy.
This is my 1992 Mitsubishi GTO Twin Turbo Japanese import. The car was imported to the UK in 1999, before that it lived the rest of its life in Japan. And about, what, it's been 11 years ago, the person who last had this car put it away in a barn. And the idea of it was to restore it because it wasn't in great condition. But the person I bought it off said when he picked the car up, nothing had been done to it, hadn't been touched for years. And with him buying it, it was in a much worse state than when he first picked it up, which led me to getting a good deal on it. So I picked it up from Manchester about a year and a half ago, I think it was. July 2021 is when I picked it up. Got it from a guy in Manchester. He was kind enough to deliver it to where we live in Liverpool, and then from there it sat outside my house until we could get this storage unit, as you can see, to then bring the car around, let me dig deep into it and see what's actually wrong with it. And I was quite shocked when I first picked it up. So when we first got the car in, it was running and driving. I initially bought it as a non-runner, because the person who I bought it off had no idea why it would start. He tried a lot of things, but the one thing he failed to check was the fuel pump starter relay. So under the bonnet, these have a problem where the starter relay tends to either corrode or sometimes it burns itself out, which then doesn't tell the fuel sender to send fuel to the engine to then start. So I took the relay out, jumped it with a bit of cable, and lo and behold, the car started. Didn't sound fantastic, but it worked. It drove under its own weight. So we were able to move it onto a flatbed to bring it here to the unit. Got it dropped off into the unit, and then from the day it was brought in here, started stripping it down and doing what we could to essentially revive it, because it was on its way to the scrapyard. I still need to dig into the engine. The engine's over there on the stand, you can see it. Feeling a bit sorry for itself, but when the chassis is done, painted, sprayed, everything on the car is finished, we'll be digging straight into that, taking it apart, checking everything, down to the piston ring tolerances, cylinder walls, cylinder lines, everything, make sure it's all okay. And what I've done to the car so far is when I first brought it here, took the bumpers off, mainly in the rear quarter, there was a lot of rust I didn't see because the plastic trims, the boot lining, it was all out the way. When I took the bumper off, the trims out and the boot lining, I saw that the passenger side, left, back, what seemed to be a pinhole pushed. As soon as I give it a pull, the whole thing fell apart. So as I was going through it, if you come around the car, you'll see on this left hand side on this quarter here, it's a bit sloppy. The body filling in there now, but I had to plate the car, I had to weld it all up. All this here where it's being filled is going to be sanded back, it's going to all be clean, all done flush. But managed to get rid of the rust, clean it up as best I could. But because the car has been sat here on this side of the unit for the past 18 months, I've only been able to do one side. So if you come round this way, this whole side of the car is being treated, being primed, being sealed on the joins where it was missed, or where I had to take it off because of the rust. And then went from the front to the back because it just seemed like the logical way to do it all. And now the car's on its wheels, moved it around, I can get onto the driver's side, see how bad that is, if it is. It doesn't seem terrible. It was only really this side of the car that was affected with the rust. But because it's old Japanese steel, as most of you probably know, old Jap cars, they love rust. You can't leave them outside in the wet for longer than a week before they start to rust. If they're not treated and looked after well. This car certainly wasn't looked after well, and that's where I stepped in to strip it back and try and restore it to its former glory, and from there modify it to how I want it to be. Take some modifications, nothing stupid or tacky. So as you can see on the back, unfortunately this bit of the car is burgundy, but the original car colour was Fuji blue. That's because this suffered the rear end collision. All this was changed, and I think that's what caused the rust. So whoever's re-welded it hasn't treated the metal underneath the welds, so it's just rusted out from there and spread. Because when I got to the back, all the seam sealer on it was just flaking off, and there was loads of rust underneath all that. So when I've done it, I've etch primed it, I've weld through primed it, welded it all properly, primed it all properly, and then gone over it with seam sealer to do a proper job of it, because I don't want that happening again, especially after having to fix it the first time. I don't want to have to do it the second. My idea for the car is to keep it for a long time, hopefully a life car if it's allowed for, but if not, at least a good few years, get me use out of it, enjoy it, be proud of it, and then sell it on to someone who will hopefully love it just as much as I have. So this is the engine for the Mitsubishi GTO I spent the past 2 years of my life trying to put back on the road. So with this one, what we're going to do, I'm going to strip it down completely, I'm going to clean it off first. When I give you a walk around, you'll see why. It's covered in dust, it's covered in spiders, cobwebs, you name it, it's on there. Rust, loves rust. So we'll tear it down, we'll dig into it. We've got a few parts there, water pump, timing belt, some idlers. There's going to be a lot more I'm going to need to buy for this. So if you stay tuned, we'll go through it all. You'll see exactly what I need to do, because there's a lot, and I mean there's a lot I need to do on this engine. So here's the engine close up. As you can see, as mentioned before, there's corrosion all around the water pump, all around the cooling hoses, well, the cooling port should I say. There's dust all over the HT leads, there's dust all over the top of the engine, the plenum, it's all pitted. The rocker cover, again, all dirty, that'll be getting painted after being cleaned. One on the back, and then one down here on the front. But as you can see, it's not clean, so we'll get it cleaned down, we'll do what we can on the outside, and then we'll start to strip everything out. And now we can just slide it straight off. And just like that, turbo for the rear of the engine is off. So the only thing left now is the turbo oil return line, and this front turbo is ready to come off. And then we're going to change that so we can do that. Let's not drop it. Ooh. There she is. Don't know if you can hear that, but that sounds a bit rough. Listen to this.
No, I just made a light out of me there, but it sounds like there's something loose. So we'll have to try and strip this down as best we can and see what's wrong with it, if there is anything. Or if it was just a one-off.
Talk to me, baby, I've been waiting for a lifetime. Just keep on fading in all these photos, caught in the memories and captured in the highlights. Just keep on wasting. Glass after glass, I keep hoping you'll come around, drowning our fights in whatever can be found, 'cause I've given in to all my demons lately.
I'll show you around the engine, or what's left of it. I'll show you what's on the bench, which is everything we've taken off today, and give you a little breakdown of what's next. Just to show you how cold it is in the unit, I've just took my glove off and my hands are steaming. So yeah, welcome to the UK, folks. As you can see on the desk behind me, we've got a lot off, got a lot done. The block itself, well, what's left of the block is starting to look a lot more bare. So soon enough, it'll be down completely in bits, and then we can start working on it, cleaning it up, painting it, changing things, gaskets, seals, bearings, you name it. I'll swap what I can. We can build it back up, hopefully start it without it blowing up, and yeah, then the car is that little bit closer to being on the road. As you can see, we're nearly there. So the timing belt needs to come off. I think we'll do that first. Then we can get the cam covers off, both sides. The sides of the engine, there's nothing left. The back, again, nothing left. Managed to get the water tube out off camera, but to be honest with you, it wasn't that bad. Just got a slide hammer that came straight off. But first things first, we'll tackle the timing belt. Hopefully we don't bend any valves. And let's just try and get it off. When you take the belt off, these won't spring like the front will. So what you do with the fronts is these two 17mm bolts on the front. You're supposed to get two spanners, get them on the bolts, cross them over. So we'll get them like that. We'll cable tie them in the middle, and that should hold them two spanners together. So when we take this timing belt off, these cams don't jump. Now we can see the belt is nice and loose, ready for it to be pulled off. Like so. Right, so now I've cut the cable ties off the spanners. I'm gonna slowly let the tension off the cams so they sit where they want to, and let it make sure all the valves are up and the cams on. Gonna damage the valves and vice versa. So now that they're out, this should hopefully just pull off, but that's disgusting. Yeah, clearly been leaking. The gaskets obviously failed, which is evident based on the lime scale around the edge of it again. Because this is aluminium, all of it, you get lime scale instead of rust, but because the block itself, I think, is cast iron on this. I might be lying, but it's full of rust, so I'd assume so. But I think you can see on the inside, I'm very glad I've got a fresh one, because no one in the right mind would have put that back on the engine expecting it to work. So, because this has been on here quite a while, give it a bit of a tap around the edges with a dead blow hammer, something soft, and hopefully that should loosen up the gasket enough for us to pull this out and miss the bolt. But that only works when you get all your bolts out. There we go. And there it is. Let's have a look. And there's very much still a lot of oil left in that. So it's nice to know nothing's rusted, but is everything where it should be? That's the next question. Right, so we'll spin the engine, we'll take off the rears, and hopefully that looks as promising as the front. And I'll just do this all the way around. And again, hopefully there's no horrible surprises. So let's come and loosen it. There it is. There's the big turbo pistons. There's the valves. Looking a bit sooty, but they can be cleaned. It's not that bad. Right, that feels loose. And off she comes. There we go. Wow. There it is again. The front side looks a lot different to the back, as you can see. The back relatively clean, relatively dry, give or take that cylinder. The front is absolutely swimming in it. That one looks alright on the right hand side. Down, so it's upside down. And take the oil pan off. Oh no. I forgot the forgot it had coolant in it. That's just gonna go everywhere anyway. There we go. Lovely stuff. There it is. Oh no. Yeah, that's not good. I'll bring you down and I'll show you why. So first of all, that oil strainer is disgusting. I suppose it's done its job, but that doesn't look good. That to me looks like bearing material, as in the big end bearings, maybe even the crank main bearings, you name it. That shouldn't be there. That's not good. That means there's something very wrong with the engine, as does all of that. That's not what we wanted to see. So that's nice and stiff. Already on. Second one in. That's not good. That's very bad. The engine's very bad. There should be no play in that whatsoever, and that's quite a lot of movement, meaning the bearings failed. So that one's defo done. This one down here, no movement. No movement. That's tight. Again, no movement. So all of this material in the strainer, all of that must be off this. And hopefully it's nothing to do with the main bearings on the actual crank. Let's see what the crack is, if it's done. Oh no. Right, so that main bearing stayed on there, so we need to pull that out. But that one is showing signs of wear. See the big score mark down the middle, and that's a different colour to the ends. I highly doubt it's down to the material. I think it's been getting hot. That one's still on there, so I'll pull that off now. And then the two end ones don't look too bad, but that's quite worrying. I'm no machinist, I'm no specialist. I haven't really got a full clue of what I'm looking at, but I know for a fact that that shouldn't be scored the way it is, because that doesn't look great. This is the one that was still on there. Same again. They're quite deep scores. You can see on the left hand side of the bearing. That is not great. So as I've just showed you, there is wear on the main bearings. I'm not surprised. I'm gutted to say the least, but I'm not surprised. Although this engine's only on 95,000 kilometers, which is roughly 60,000 miles, which actually isn't that much. So it only really goes to show how well the engine's been looked after previously, i.e. not at all. So we'll get down to it. We'll get the big end caps off, all the pistons, all the rods, and no doubt those bearings will be done in as well. I know for a fact cylinder 1 is, but we'll work our way through and hopefully it's only cylinder 1. So yeah, let's get to it. Well, the bottom end of this engine is just the gift that keeps on giving, because I've just went to remove the rear main seal and I looked at the housing and it looks like this. Boom! Nice big crack right down the middle. And the worst part is, I think I've just done that, because it splits from the case there. So, managed to get the bolt out the back, even though it's quite tight. Got it from the case, and there's the crack. And then I looked at the top, and there she is. And just like that, there's your oil pump. There we go. Bit of gentle persuasion. And there it is. That is the crankshaft for the Mitsubishi 6G72 V6. There's the crank. I've got my torch on, so apologies if the quality is not great. I will try and get as good a view of it as I can. But this here is where the rattly piston was sitting. So as you can see, there's quite a fair bit in terms of score marks all the way around on the crank, which isn't good. That should be smooth, like this one for example. Nice and smooth, no scratches, no scores, nothing. But because the bearing had spun on this, it created excess wear. It wasn't getting lubricated as it should, and in turn it's made an excess of scoring all around it. Backside's the same, and that is because of this piston right here. I don't even need to wipe the oil away for you to see. That is disgusting. All those individual lines on the inside should not be there. That is just wrong. So after doing some research and just looking around on the internet, on forums, and seeing if anyone else has had the issues I've had, I think the bearing on the rod that had spun was down to oil starvation. The reason I say that is because on the GTO, like most engines, you've got this. This is called an oil strainer, or pickup tube, whatever you want to call it. So it sits like that in the base of the engine, in the oil, in the sump. It picks the oil up and then it shoots it to the oil pump, and that circulates around the engine, helps to keep everything lubricated. But this is the oil pan of the GTO. It sits like that, and I don't know if you can see on the camera, but on the bottom there's a massive dent right there. And it's quite common on the GTOs, the 3000 GTs. What tends to happen is you hit the curb, or you hit a speed bump, or you hit anything with that, it dents, and as it dents on the inside of the sump, right down there, that dent goes up and then it hits the pickup tube and it starves the pickup tube of oil, so it can't pick up as much oil as it actually needs to circulate around the engine efficiently, to lubricate the engine and to prevent the bearings spinning. So I think that's what's happened to this GTO, unfortunately, along with the lack of maintenance, lack of oil changes and all that. It doesn't help, but that is what I think is the main cause, but I can't be definite, but I'm going to go with it because it makes the most sense. Today we're working on something rather in depth, like I've said in a previous video, so we'll just get straight into it and we're stripping the heads down. So first things first, I'm going to take the cam pulleys off the cams, and I'm going to keep the intake pulley with the intake cam and the exhaust pulley with the exhaust cam, purely because then I know when I put it all back together, it goes back together the way it came apart, and I don't think this engine's been touched before, so that should be right. Now I'm going to take these 10 bolts out, so the 2 end caps and the 3 centre caps for the cam, and to do this I'm going to loosen them from the centre outwards to relieve the pressure on the cam evenly, because the last thing I want to do at this moment is snap the cam because that's even more money I've got to spend on this engine. Now, because these cam seals have been in for 30 years, they are quite tight, so I'm going to use a little bit of gentle persuasion to get them off. And then when they're free, I can pull the caps off the end and I can lift the cam out the head, and that is the exhaust side of this head done onto the intake. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. I hope you like what you see and you're enjoying the content so far. If you click the bottom right watermark, it'll take you to the channel and you can see all the other videos I've uploaded. And if you click on the top right hand corner now, that'll take you to the playlist of the GTO's engine build, and you can see it from the start all the way up to the point that we're at now. So after the heavy clean down and a lot of elbow grease, we managed to get the head looking nice and shiny. There's the head, looks a bit cleaner than it was, as you can see. Nice and shiny-ish. So now I'm going to lap the valves. Right, so this valve seat here, this one is being relapped. As you can see, it's nice and shiny. There's a nice mating surface, whereas that is what it was like before. I mean, there's a noticeable night and day difference. But yeah, so that's the one that's just being lapped. That is the valve, and as you can see, there's a nice shiny... Ooh, let it focus. There's a nice shiny edge on the valve, meaning it's got a good seat. And there are specifications that needs to meet for it to be within tolerance, which this is, so I'll show you that now. So all four seats are being lapped in this one, and as you can see, they're a nice shiny silver, meaning they'll seal well, as are the valves, and the valves are being lapped to their particular seat so they're in the right place. Now you'll see that I've put all the valves back in, all the springs, all the collets, they've all gone back in the reverse order as to how you take them out. Everything's tight and works as it should. Now you can see I put the 3mm oil lifters in the head that are machine fit, so they're nice and snug. And then after that I've put the rocker arms back on the top, so the head is pretty much done. So we've got pretty much everything we need to get it going again. Both heads are being built up, so both the heads are done. The cams are all nice and clean, so is the timing gears, the cam gear. We've got some brand new piston rings, a piston ring compressor to get them on, a cylinder honing tool to clean the cylinders up just to get rid of the glaze. I finally found another rear main seal because the one I took off over there is cracked. Some brand new main bearings, big end bearings, thrust washers, a new piston, the 2-bolt main. Then we've got the gaskets, head gaskets, cam cover gaskets, and all the little fiddly bits, which is everything we need to start putting this engine back together. So before I begin honing, I'm going to rub a little bit of engine oil in the cylinders, and that is purely just to lubricate the hone as it's going round, because if you were to put the stones in dry, they will go in quite harsh and you can put some very deep grooves into the cylinders. Now you don't want that, so a little bit of engine oil and we should be good to go. So now that the cylinders are lubricated, we can get the honing tool in and we can begin to make a crosshatch. So as you can see now, the cylinder has a nice crosshatch on it, and compared to the one next to it, there's no glaze and there's no shine. So we'll crack on and we'll get the other 6 cylinders done. So now all the cylinders have been honed. You can see they've all got a nice crosshatch in them. We'll strip the rings off these pistons, put the new ones on, and to do that we'll have to check the ring clearance against the cylinders. So I'll show you exactly how I'm going to do that right now. So on the trusty whiteboard you can see we have the piston ring tolerances, 1 being the top, 2 being the middle, and oil being the bottom rings. And here's the rings, 1 for the top, 2 for the bottom, and 3 being the oil rings. The first thing I'm going to do is remove all the old piston rings and then give the pistons a really good clean to remove any dirt or debris. And if you look closely here, you can see the oil galleries from the inside of the piston that go to the oil ring on the outside. That's why it's corrugated, to help lubricate the piston as it's going up and down in the cylinder. And now I'll do the same on the other 5 pistons. So if you've liked what you've seen so far whilst I'm removing these old piston rings, why don't you jump down below and press that subscribe button and press the like button while you're there, because it's free, it helps the channel and it doesn't take too long, unlike removing these piston rings. I also have Instagram, so why don't you all give me a follow on that to keep up to date with all the little updates I post on the TT, the GTO and all future projects that we're going to have on this channel. To measure the piston ring gap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ring in the cylinder and then use the crown of the piston to press the ring down to make sure it's straight inside the cylinder. I'll then get my feeler gauges, and on the gap that's created by the ring, I'll get the feeler gauge in, and providing that the width of that gap is within the tolerance limits, the ring is okay to use. If it's not, we'll have to file them down. Luckily enough, every ring I tried on this engine was in tolerance and it was all okay. So now I've got the new piston rings on the pistons, and you can see that all the rings are different. So the second ring is directional, so you have to make sure that that goes in facing the right way. So as you can see now, there's a little indentation on the top of the ring, so when you see that ring, that means that's the top, and that's how it should go onto the piston. And if there's not a dot, usually there's also an etch on the opposite side that says top. So that one is directional. The top ring is actually a universal, it can go in either way, and the oil ring, again, that's the same. So now we can put the pistons in the block, and as you can see on the head of the piston there's an arrow facing forward, which means that points towards where the timing belt is going to go. So the piston has to go in that way. So we'll get the piston ring compression tool on it, tighten it up to get the rings to squash into the piston so we don't have to fight with them when we get them in the cylinder. We'll have the bottom end of the piston hanging out so we can put that into the engine, and then when it seats in just nicely, we'll line it up, give it a tap at the back of a hammer, and we'll seat the piston home. And just like that, there's cylinder 1 done. On to the other 5. First, to put some assembly lube on the main journals, and then I'll put the oil channel side of the main bearings in. After that, we'll then stick the thrust washers in, and that sets us up nicely to put the crank in. So it was at this point I realised I probably should have put the crank in first before putting the pistons in, because now I'm going to struggle getting it around the big ends of the rods, but every day's a school day, and at least I'll know for next time. Because I'm stubborn, I decided to struggle on anyway, and eventually I got the crank in. But it wasn't in for long, because when I got the crank in I realised I didn't put the bearings on the big ends on the rods, so it had to come back out. But I'm glad I noticed it now and not after I'd torqued everything down, so there's always a silver lining. So now it's round 2 with the crank, and this time it's staying in. So now I'm going to seat the rods against the crank so I can get the big end caps on loosely, and torque the big end caps down, fit the other half of the bearings and the thrust washers to the crank brace, get that on the engine, torque it down in the sequence on screen now, because that's what Mitsubishi say do. And the crank rotates freely, which is always a good sign. And now it's time to fit the oil pump, the pickup tube and gaskets, and torque that down, and RTV seal the bottom of the block, ready for the oil pan to go on with some fresh new bolts. And that is the oil pan bolted down and the bottom of this engine completely built. So now I've got cylinder 1 to top dead centre, and you can see on the crank pulley that it is lined up with the timing marks. So that means we can now get both head gaskets on and get the heads on. So now we'll get the front head on. We'll align the dowel pins on the block to the head to make sure that that's in the right position. Then we'll do the exact same for the rear, and we can move on to the head bolts. When installing the head bolts, I'm going to put some oil on the threads so they don't go in dry, because that's what the manual tells you to do. And then once all the bolts are in and the threads are all oiled, we'll get them torqued up, and you're supposed to do it in 3 stages. You're supposed to tighten it up in a sequence of 3, and then on the last tightening, you torque it down to 125 Newton meters. Then you back the bolts off and you retighten in the same sequence again. And then that is the final torque for the heads. So the first thing we'll do is we'll put some assembly lube in the cam journals, because the engine will have no oil in it, and the last thing you want to do is rotate the cams with no oil, because you could damage the journals and the cams, and we'll have to rotate the cam when we come to time the engine up. Now we can fit the exhaust cam, and we need to make sure that the dial pin on the end of the cam where the pulley goes is in the right orientation based on where the manual wants it to be. That's going to be the same for the intake and the opposite bank. If you look on the cam caps, you'll see there's an arrow which points towards the front of the engine, I think. But there's also arrows on the head which tell you that those arrows need to line up and point in the same direction to make sure the caps are on correctly. The caps are also numbered so you can't get them wrong from 1 to 3. So if we do as the manual tells us to, we're all good. Time for more assembly lube, and then we can get the cam caps on and we can get them torqued down and then carry on with the rest of the cams. This bit nearly caught me out because the middle caps are only torqued to 11 Nm and the outer caps are torqued to 20 Nm. But when I first read the manual, I thought that they were all torqued down to 20 Nm, and that to me didn't seem right, so I went over it again and then I realised the centre caps are only 11. So I'm glad I double checked, because the last thing I'd want to do is drill out the bolts on this head and get metal filings in the heads and then have to clean them again. So let's fit this new water pump. Just like that. So for this next thing, I've done this really detailed drawing and it looks like it came from the manual itself. But the reason for the drawing is we're now going to fit all the ancillaries for the timing belt, including the pulleys and the brackets, and they all have specific torque specs that they need to be torqued down to. So the reason for the drawing is it just makes it easier than going on my phone all the time. I can just refer to the trusty whiteboard. So we've got to fit and torque the timing gears, but to do this is a little different than everything else because you've got to hold them in place using the cams. And to do that, on the cam, there's little hexagonal moulds in the casting. So you get a spanner on this side, and as you're torquing that side, you hold it there so the cam doesn't rotate whilst you're trying to torque the pulley. So hopefully you've got a spanner big enough to get on there. If not, I have got adjustables I can use, so we'll get that on and we'll try and get these cam gears torqued. So when I removed these pulleys from the cams, I marked the pulleys with an E for the exhaust and an I for the intake, so I knew what cam they came off, so when I put them back on I know exactly where they go. So it turns out a 24mm spanner fits nice and snug on a hexagonal cast. But the weird thing is, it's different on the opposite side, didn't go over, so I needed to use an adjustable for that side. But I'm just glad they had something big enough to hold them. And that is all 4 cam gears torqued to spec. So in order to time up the GTO's engine, we need to see the visual arrows for the timing marks, but I've only just realised the timing marks for this engine are on the cam covers. So we need to put the cam covers on, but I'm not going to bolt them down because they need to come off to be painted and resealed anyway. But we'll put them on now so we can see where the timing marks line up so we can get this engine timed. So now that all the ancillaries for the timing belt are on the engine and they're torqued up, we now need to align these timing marks there, there, there and there with the marks on the engine, on the case, sorry. So that needs to come this way, this needs to go that way, and the rears are actually pretty close to in time as they are. So now we'll get the timing belt on, we'll route it round the way it should, based on 1, the manual, and 2, my crude drawing on the trusty whiteboard. I've also just fitted the tensioner idler, but it's not tight. The reason it's not tight is that it needs to sway. So when you tighten the timing belt down with this, you also need to preload it by moving this in, which then adds more tension to the belt. So once the belt's on, we'll pre-tension it, then we'll pull that pin out, which lets the cylinder fire forward to swing this arm up and add tension to the timing belt. So I've just had a reread through the workshop manual and I noticed it says on the auto tensioner up here, you need to apply thread sealant to the bolts. I don't know why. They must go through an oil gallery for the turbochargers or something like that, or the oil cooler, the way it interferes. But on the NA engines, it doesn't seem necessary, but on the turbo engines, that's a must. And we don't want any oil leaks. So I've gone back, I've done that, and I've retorqued those bolts. So as you can see on the crankshaft side of things, there's that pin. And then that pin lines up with the tooth, which lines up with the timing mark that tells you cylinder 1 is at top dead centre. But what we've got to do, it seems very counterintuitive, is you've got to rotate this anti-clockwise by 1 tooth, and that's because as the belt comes up here, you're going to have slack within these pulleys. And what you need to do is when you rotate that anti-clockwise 1 tooth, as it rotates clockwise, it'll pick up the slack and it'll allow that tooth to line up. So when you tighten it all up, time everything up at the top as well as the bottom, give it a full rotation, that tooth will then line up with that mark and all the markings up here should also line up with the markings on the heads there and there. So again, it seems very counterintuitive and it is quite a scary thing to do, but it does work because I've done this last time on my NA GTO and hope it doesn't go wrong, because if it does, it makes me look stupid and I'm going to have to do it all again. So as you can see here now, I've rotated this anti-clockwise the tooth. There's the notch at the top, there's the tooth next to it. So now we should be ready to fit the timing belt. So just like in the video where I took the engine apart, I'm going to use the 2 spanners and cable tie trick to get these 2 gears in time. Get the belt round this, over them, round the back, down, and then we'll rotate this. Again, using another hack because Mitsubishi have a special tool for that I don't have. Then we'll tighten it all up, give it a full rotation, and hopefully it's all in time. All I'm doing here is I'm manually rotating the cams with the spanners to get the timing marks to line up with the arrows on the head. I'll then cable tie the spanners together to keep them in position in time. Just be careful if you do it this way in case they slip, in case the cable ties come loose for whatever reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also apply a bit of pressure with my hands whilst I'm routing the belt around and over the top of the cam pulleys. When fitting the timing belt, have it going over the far left pulley first and then work your way towards the right when you're facing the engine. And as you're doing this, you need to make sure that you keep tension on the belt, especially while it goes around the water pump. Otherwise you'll probably end up being a tooth off by the time it does a rotation and everything is under tension. So as you can now see, that yellow mark there lines up with that arrow. Under there you can see the yellow mark, that lines up with that arrow. That yellow timing mark is just off, but the tension should pick that up to line up with that arrow. Same with that, to line up with that arrow. And that's why we rotated that 1 tooth anti-clockwise, to pick that tension up and everything in between. So now we'll have to rotate this clockwise to add more tension to the belt. And to do that, I'll show you exactly what I want to do. So to add tension to this belt, without having a special tool for this, what I have got is a pair of C-clip pliers. Ideally, it's better if you've got the right angled one so you can add leverage that way. But we'll get these in here, nice fit, and we'll rotate them to add tension to the belt. There, the spanners have jumped off. And then once we've got a bit of tension on that belt, then get a 14mm underneath, tighten that up. Now that belt is under tension, as is the rest. So when we rotate this, that 1 tooth off there should pick up the slack and we'll have it all in time. So what we'll do now in order to get this to spin properly is we'll get the harmonic bouncer back on. See a little pin there that lines up with the pin in there. The whole just nip that up to the point where you can feel it move. And now it's time to rotate it to make sure the timing belt and all the gears stay in time. And because we're rotating it by hand, we've left the spark plugs out because you don't want any compression, just to make it that bit easier to spin it round. So if all of that is timed up as it should be, we'll do a full rotation on the engine to make sure the cams have gone a full rotation round. And then when we get them back in time, that lower tooth, the notch in the crankshaft pulley, should be back to where it was just then. And that means the engine is fully timed and it's timed correctly. Then we can tighten up the tensioner pulley and pull the pin on the hydraulic tensioner to get that to apply tension to the belt. The engine has got assembly lube in it, so in terms of rotating it with no oil, it is okay, because I have lubricated everything as I put it back together. So now let's give it a spin. So now I'm going to use the clutch basket removal tool for the motorbike, because I don't have the right tool for that, which I did use to take this off when I started disassembling the engine in that video. So if you haven't saw that, click that one. And the reason being is there's 2 pins on the back, so I'll get the pins in here. And now we're going to go anti-clockwise enough to take the timer marks off time, technically. And that is to put tension on the belt one way, and then we'll come back clockwise to get the 2 on the top in time, them 2 in time. And then when we look down through there, we should see that notch be either bang on the arrow, hopefully, or sometimes with these it's just off, but that's as close as you're going to get it. So we'll go anti-clockwise just to take them off time. So as you can see,
They're just off time by a tooth. And they're off time by a tooth. And then we'll go clockwise again to get them in time. So they're now in time. And they're in time. And just down here, that notch is as close to in time as it's going to be. It's less than what, a third of a tooth, which isn't that bad.
So now the moment of truth, the terrifying part, because if I've got this wrong, I could cause a bit more damage than I'd like to. But if I get it right, then fantastic. Don't have to do it again, but if I've got it wrong, I'll have to take the belt off again and do that whole process one more time. So let's hope it works.
Oh, I'm nervous. So, everything seems free so far. So they're back in time, which is good. These top two are back in time, which is even better. And just in there is exactly where it was before. So that's good news. That means the engine is correctly timed, which means we can also now tighten up the tensioner pulley again, pull the pin out on the hydraulic tensioner, and that timing belt is on. That's such an unnecessarily scary process. So same again, I haven't got the tool, but I use these. Get this in, loosen it off slightly, keep applying the rotational pressure, tighten it back up. Now we can pull that pin out, which allows that pin there to press against that arm to swing this whole tensioner forward and add more tension to this belt. And there it is. Now that the auto tensioner hydraulic pin's being pulled, you can see it lines up so much better. So as the hydraulic fluid forces that pin out against that lever, that will now automatically apply tension to the belt. So like I said before, over time when the belt starts to stretch as it goes through heat cycles and just general wear and tear, that will keep everything tight, everything taut up and in time. Because if it doesn't, the engine goes boom. So I've took the rocker covers back off. They're on the bench over there because they need to be painted. But now that everything's in time, one thing we do need to install is the crank angle sensor that goes on the back of the rear bank intake cam. So we'll go over to that now. We'll fit that properly, bolt that up, and that is going to be everything for this video in terms of getting the engine in time. And it's exciting to see it going back together. And it's not going to be long until we can get the engine back in the GTO and hopefully doesn't go boom on the first start. So this is a crank angle sensor, and what that does is this, as you can see here, has two arms either side. This goes into the cam on the rear intake cam, and as this rotates like so, it tells the engine what position and what angle the crank is in. The reason it does that is because it helps the engine decide how much fueling to put in, helps the engine decide timing, and that is all relative based on the engine's RPM. It doesn't just know, it needs this, and it needs to know where it is on this to be able to fuel the engine properly, set the right timing for the spark, and make sure your engine runs at a higher RPM. And that's why when fitting a crank angle sensor, you need to make sure you fit it correctly, otherwise the engine will get incorrect data, meaning it won't be able to set the timing right for the spark, it won't be able to set what fuel and mixture it needs based on the engine's RPM. And to do that, Mitsubishi have said that on this sensor here, don't know if you can see it, there's a notch, and on the arms there, on that arm there, again, there's another notch. So you need to line that up to make sure it's straight. Then when you put it into the cam, in this case, when you put it into the cam here, in those slotted grooves, you need to make sure that the markings line up with each other so it goes in the right orientation. So when it does start rotating, the engine knows exactly where it is, what fueling to set, and what time to set. And I really hope I haven't got that wrong. So now we'll get the sensor in, we'll make sure those fingers line up with the grooves in there, and based on where it bolts down, it can only go in one way, so I can't put it in upside down, which is good. But the first thing I need to do is, because oil comes out of here, because it is the camshaft,
I'm missing an O-ring off this because I am replacing it, so we need to get the O-ring on this and we can get it in. So now we've got a fresh O-ring on. I've put a little bit of oil around the edges just so it doesn't go in dry. The marks on that are now lined up with the notch on the side of the case, so we can get this lined up, get this nut off first, otherwise we're not going to get it in. Get this lined up, get it in the cam, and make sure it seats as it should. And there she is. So now we'll get the washer and the nut back on, get it down nice and tight, and that is the cam angle sensor fitted. Now the manual says that this needs to be tightened down to 12 newton meters. So we'll set the torque wrench up, we'll get it on like so, and we'll push till it clicks. And that's that. That doesn't feel that tight, but if the manual says it, it must be right. The unit is absolutely peppered in refurb parts, new parts, stuff to go on this engine that have been sat around for a while I've been preparing everything for this video, because I wasn't going to do anything without showing you. So I'll take you around the unit now and I'll show you exactly what I've done to get everything ready to get it on this engine. So the ignition coil bracket's been refurbed, the coils are being cleaned and tested and you're all okay. The PTU bracket's been done. I know I haven't changed the bolts, it does annoy me as well, but I can't find bolts that fit. Engine bracket 1 finished, engine bracket 2 finished. The aluminium lightweight engine mount for the right hand side of the engine, which I didn't know it was that until I ground it down, is done. The fuel rails have been cleaned, the injectors have been split down, cleaned and resealed. The intake run has been done. The bonnet is full of mess, but it's all good mess because we've got some brand new hoses to replace all the old cracked, perished ones. We've got a new rib belt for the alternator, a new V-belt for the power steering pump. The aircon compressor's been stripped down, cleaned and checked, that seems okay. Same with the alternator, all the other brackets. The thermostat housing has a new thermostat in, which I'll show you now. So as you could expect, the old cooling system, oh, need to take the masking tape off, that was absolutely ruined. So cleaned that up, sprayed it nicely, and that one, got as much of the crappy rusty coolant out as I can. But one thing that was 100% a must on this is brand new thermostat. So when this car gets hot, that'll open up, let it cool down, and hopefully it doesn't burst the water pump, because unfortunately that is a very common problem on these cars. So if you ever go to view one to buy one and you see what looks like rust all over the gearbox or the left hand side of the engine, it's probably overheated at some point. And also check the timing belt, because chances are if it has overheated and that's burst out the reservoir, the timing belt might also have water on it off a leaky water pump. So the thermostat fits in a dream. The seal around it's nice, got a brand new gasket to go on top, and then we'll get the housing over the top and that unit will look new. I have also got a little trick to fix these, because even though they are painted, they're corroded something terrible, so they're never going to seal on the hoses. So what I've decided to do is, I've got some barb fittings with threads on the end, so I'll drill them old ones off. I'll tap the holes and bolt those barb fittings in, so when the hoses go in, they've got something clean to bite to, so they actually seal, because the last thing I want is coolant all over the engine bay and for the engine to overheat. Power steering pump's also been gone through and that's okay. Same with the oil filter, housing, holder bracket thingy, whatever that is. And one more thing we've done, which I'm really happy with, is the cam covers, because they've come out so well, a lot better than I expected them to. And the paint on it before wasn't fantastic. So I'll show you the cam covers and I'll tell you what I did. So the cam covers came out a lot nicer than I expected them to, and I'm really happy with them, like I've just said. But one thing I did also do, as you've just seen in the video there, is once they were sprayed yellow, I went over them with a paintbrush and meticulously painted all the little raised letters on the cam cover, because it's always the little things that make the biggest difference. So now we'll get the rocker cover and we'll run a bead of sealant around the crevices on the edge of the cover for the gasket to sit into. This is purely just to help the gasket seal that little bit better, so we definitely don't end up with any oil leaks from the heads. Now we'll do the same around the spark plug holes and get the gaskets pressed in and make sure they're fully seated. Once they're fully seated, we can now get the covers on the engine and we can get them bolted down. Now we can get the bolts in, refer to the trusty whiteboard for the tightening sequence, and we can get these torqued down. So now the front rocker cover is on, and I've cleaned up all the expulsion that's come out the side. I'm going to do exactly the same to the back, and that's the rocker covers on. And here it is, both rocker covers are on, and I think it looks fantastic. Now we'll get the fuel rails in with the intake runner, because we can get them straight in the middle and we can keep making steady progress. So before I put the intake runner on, I'm going to clean the surfaces down with some brake cleaner and a rag, just to make sure there's no imperfections on the surface, and when the gasket goes on it will actually seal. Now you can put the steel gaskets on and they'll actually seal properly. Funny story about these. When I first opened the gasket kit box, I could only see in the bag that there was one of these gaskets and I needed two, and at which point I started panicking because I'd already got rid of the old ones. But then I realised very quickly when I was looking around the gaskets that both of the gaskets were just stuck together, but because of how thin they are, I didn't tell initially. Now it's in with the intake runner and we can bolt it down. Next is the fuel rails with the freshly sealed injectors, and we'll get them torqued up. And then on with the fuel rail link pipe with some fresh green O-rings. So on goes the lower cam belt cover, the upper engine mount bracket, and now for the harmonic balancer.
Now I've got to try and torque this bolt up to 185mm, holding the pulley with this and trying to torque with the other arm. This should be fun. What have we got there?
Now I think I'll do something easy like fitting a dipstick tube. So on goes the power steering pump and belt tensioner bracket. Next is the rear engine mount. And then after that is the alternator bracket, so then all the rear mounts are on this engine.
So fitting the power steering pump is very simple. There's just a stud there with a nut and a washer, and then there's a big bolt that goes on the bottom. Literally just slide this over the top so it hangs on. Get your nuts and your washer on. And then swing it up. And then get that massive bolt in. And then tighten them up, and that's literally it to get the power steering pump on. So this hard line here is the reason why we couldn't get the air conditioning bracket on, because this bolts to this. And I didn't have any crush washers to bolt it up, otherwise I'd have had oil leaks and I couldn't have got to it once that bracket's on. So we'll get that on with new crush washers. I think this is a oil feed line to the front turbo, not 100% sure. But we'll get this on, bolt it up, get the bracket on, get the AC compressor on, you can get the alternator on, get the belts on the front. And I think that's it for this video.
If you've made it this far into the video and you haven't clicked subscribe, go click the subscribe button down below, because we're building the channel up and it'll really help us out.
Now that housing's aluminium, so you be careful not to over tighten there. Little strip. Now you can see bolt straight up. I still don't fully know if this works, but we'll find out.
So now the AC compressor's on, we'll get the alternator on, and then the two idle pulleys for the belts. That's all the spinny stuff on the front of the engine, and it's now time to get the belts on. We need to get the belts on now for the alternator so it actually works, and the power steering pump belt as well, that needs to go on. I am aware I haven't put the exhaust manifolds on yet, or the turbos. I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing with them yet. I know I've made it harder for myself in the future, but I'll get it in. So let's get these belts on. The power steering pump just goes over the harmonic balancer onto the rear pulley, over the top, and then over the power steering pump. Now that the belt's on and the tension is back on, I'm going to use the square end of an extension bar get it in like so, leverage it up. You see the hole comes in, get the tension and bolts in there. Now that the belt's on, it's already quite tight because it hasn't got no stretch in it. Gonna just get this back in, apply a little bit of pressure just to swing it up, tighten this tension and bolt up. That's tight. And then this one, again, that's tight. Now that belt is on. It's got a nice bit of flex in it. I'll check the manual to see how much it's supposed to have. Now we can get the alternator belt on and adjust them all properly. And this bolt here at the back, there's a little arm on it. I'll zoom in so you can see it. There's a little arm, and as you tighten this bolt, that arm comes up. As you loosen it, the arm comes down. This bolts to that arm, and as it moves up and down, it's what applies the tension to the belt to keep it all nice and taut. So at the minute, I'm just going to loosen it off to get it as low as I can. And then when I get the pulley on, I'll tighten it back up, and that'll give me the tension on the belt. So that pulley's in loosely, and I will tighten the bolt at the top, this one here. See how it moves when I move the pulley? That's because it pulls this up. So we'll tighten that down to there just while it's in position. Then we can tighten that up, get the belt under the right deflection, which I assume is how much it moves from top to bottom. Get that all right, and then that's both belts on the front of the engine. It's so weird to see how much of it's going back together. We're getting there. So that's up tight. Get this in. Just get it nipped, but not tight. Now we'll get a smaller ratchet in with a 12mm on it. You see the deflection in the belt now. There's a fair bit of slack in it. So we'll get on this and tighten it up. You can feel the belt getting tighter. So now the cam belt covers are on, we're going to get the spark plugs in as well, along with the HT leads, and get that bracket bolted to the side of the engine, just so I can remove the tissue out the front. And they're going in anyway, so we might as well do it now. I've also bought some fancy upgraded ones. So what I've got for this engine is some of the NGK Iridium plugs, because you get a better spark with Iridium, and you don't have to gap them because they're already pre-gapped. But we'll get all 6 of these in. We'll get the HT leads on, that bolted to the side of the engine, and then that is actually when the video is finished. So let's get straight into it. So now I can gently insert the spark plugs and I'll get them torqued up. And yes, I do torque my spark plugs. You can come at me in the comments, but at least I know I won't strip them out. So we'll start with the rears. We need to get the cable clips in. For this one on the lead here is label number 2, which is this cylinder. This one is number 4, and this one is number 6. So in this side we've got 1, then we've got 3, and then 5. And now to get the coil pack on. So I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but on the tops of the coil pack there are stamped numbers, and I only found them when I took all the rust off to paint it. But those stamped numbers indicate what cylinders go to what part of which coil. So what we'll do is we can get this bolted up and we can get all the coils put on based on those stamped numbers. Number 1 comes here. There it is. Number 3. That is number 5. Coil 4 in. 4. 2. Now that the HT leads are in and the coil packs are bolted back on and everything's wired up, I'll neaten the cables up so it looks all pretty. Then all the coil cable management looks spot on, and I couldn't be happier with the way it's turning out. Well guys, today's the day, because the engine bay on the GTO has been empty for a while, so today is the day we get this 3-litre twin turbo V6 and this 5-speed Getrag manual gearbox back in the engine bay. And hopefully if we've got everything we need and we've done everything right, we'll get the first start in this video, because this GTO hasn't ran properly for a good 14 years. What I mean by that is, when I got the car, I did get it running, but it had severe rod knock. It sounded horrendous and there was a lot of problems with it. But when I took this engine out, I said to myself, I'm not putting it back in that state for it to do the exact same thing, or even worse. But in terms of fitting the engine back into the car, I actually don't know where to start with this. But where better to start than on the engine itself. So what I'll do is, we'll go around the engine, we'll double check everything. There's a few things we need to put back on it. First goes on the ring gasket, then the turbo gasket, and then the turbo. Fitting the new turbo is basically the reverse of what you've just seen to remove the old turbo, but I'll show you it anyway. So now the turbo's bolted on, it's back on with the braided coolant lines and the oil lines, and we've got to make sure that these are nice and tight because we're not taking these back off. So that's the rear turbo on with the coolant return line, the coolant feed line, the oil feed line. The downpipe is on. I do need to put another bolt in there because there's studs. I don't want to have a stud that will fit, so I'll do that in a bit. But underneath the turbo, you can see this here is where the oil feed, the oil return pipe goes. That's that one on the floor there. So we need to get a gasket on there with the pipe that goes from there down and back into the sump. We'll get that back on. We'll get the rear heat shield on. Then that's the rear turbo finished. I'll fit the front because it's the same thing, and then we can carry on. So now I'm fitting the original turbo oil return lines to the turbo because the upgrade wasn't really an upgrade, but I suppose they do say they don't make them like they used to. And that is the brand new rear turbo fitted to the engine. The first thing we'll do is take all this tissue out. We don't need it anymore. Then we'll get a brand new gasket on. Came with the gasket kit I got. Fix it in. Nice and flat. Now we'll get the plenum over. Like I said, it's not the way I wanted it to look, so it's a bit dirty, but we'll get it off at some point in the future, polish it up and stick back on. But for now, this will do the job. So the plenum's on, there's 2 nuts either side, 5 bolts in the middle, 2 bolts at the back, and this little bracket thing that bolts up here, like so. So we'll get all that bolted up and then we're good to go. So I remember when I first took this plenum off, and now it's weird to be putting it back on knowing that the whole engine's being rebuilt. It's quite the achievement for me because it's the first engine I've fully rebuilt, but now I just hope it starts and now I've done everything right. But if you're liking this build series so far, hit the subscribe button down below and go check out the playlist for the engine build because we go through everything. And if you hit the subscribe, you'll be able to see if it actually starts or if it goes boom. But anyway, out here is now clean and the engine is slung on the crane with a chain. The lighting's not the best, so I've got my ring light on the back to try and show you what I've done. So I've got it up here, I've got a rag just to protect the front cam cover with the paint and also to stop it from cracking. And on the back, there's a little lifting hook which I've got the chain onto. So hopefully we can lift it off the engine, get it down on the mat and then get the gearbox on it. So I realised it was a lot easier to lift the engine and stand and then slide the stand off the engine whilst it's in the air than to try and slide the engine off the stand whilst the stand was on the floor. So now that the engine's down on the floor, that's the first time it's been off that stand for 2.5 years. So now we need to get this back plate off, which is with those 4 19mm bolts, and then we'll get that plate off and we can get the gearbox bolted to it after getting the flywheel and the clutch on. Fitting the flywheel is very simple, as long as the flywheel is flat against the crank and you know it's flush and all your bolts are in and they're all nice and tight so it doesn't come off when you start the engine, you know you've done it properly. So now the flywheel's on and I've match marked the bolts, but it's annoyed me the way I haven't done it all the way around the same. But anyway, here's the clutch. And in the box you get a new throwout bearing, which is what this is. Grease, I'm assuming, for when you're lining the spline up. We are. Spline hub grease, that's what that is. And we have a clutch plate, which is the friction disc that goes between the flywheel and the spring plate. Ooh, jellies. It's little things, eh? And there's the spring plate. So let's get this on. If you look at the friction disc on the clutch, you'll see that it has to go in a certain way, and that's because on one side you have a marking which says T/M. that means transmission. So what that means is that side's got to face the gearbox, because if you put it on the other way around, I don't think it'll actually bolt on because of how big the spring pack is on the clutch plate. So we'll get that on the right way around, and then we can get the spring plate on.
So technically the assembly is on, but before I tighten any of those bolts all around it, you can probably see on the inside, the clutch disc isn't centered with the flywheel. So the only way I can do that really, because I don't have a sensing tool, is to use my 12mm Allen key socket bit on the end of an extension. And what I can do is, because that moves about, I can get it in, get the 12mm in the hole of the flywheel, and hold it so it's fairly centered, and tighten everything else down. Now that it's all tight, you can see it's not that far off really. I think the gearbox will pull the rest of that back in. Speaking of gearboxes, we're at that point now where we can get it off the stand and get it onto the engine.
Before we fit the gearbox, we need to fit the new throwout bearing. So what this does is this bearing presses against the springs on the clutch, but because the clutch is spinning, the bearing also needs to spin. So as it's putting forward pressure on the springs, it's spinning at the same time, so changing this now is definitely a must.
So now the new throwout bearing's on, it's time to get this on that.
Fitting a clutch is never easy, and especially when it comes to getting the gearbox back on, but this gearbox weighs an absolute ton. So after a lot of faffling around and wiggling it about, I finally got the splines to line up and the box went on.
So after faffing around the gearbox for quite a while, it just wouldn't go on, and I couldn't figure out why. It turns out the back and plate wasn't on the dial properly, so fixed that, got the box on, now we can get it in the car.
Now although this engine bay looks massive, when the engine's in and all the ancillaries and the components that make the engine work are in as well, it becomes very tight very quick. So getting the engine back in isn't an easy task, because you've got to line it up with 4 different engine mounts, whilst trying to make sure you're not crushing anything and everything lines up. But eventually I got it in, it just took a while.
Well, it's 11:40 PM, so technically today was the day that the engine went in. Well, this is it. This is where we left the GTO in the last video. We got the engine in, not unconnected, and we don't even know if it starts. But hopefully by the end of today's video, I'll be sat here with a smile on my face, because I've put this key in the ignition and it started. But even though the engine's in, there's still a lot to do. But anyway, I think it's time we crack down, because it's absolutely freezing and there's a lot to do. So the lifting chain's off the engine, and I think the next thing really is to just start plugging stuff in.
So now I'm plugging in the coolant temperature sensor, the coolant temperature switch, the ignition coil plugs, the PTU plugs, the wheel speed sensor on the gearbox, the knock sensor, the oil pressure switch, the rear injector plug, the cam position sensor, and the throttle position sensor.
So that's most of it connected up. The injectors on the front, these plugs, we are going to have to make this one off because it's damaged. And I think what I'll do is, because I've got 6 new ones, I'll do the front 3. The back 3 were actually okay, so I don't have to do them. But one thing as well is, because this engine's being, well, rebuilt and there's no oil pressure in it, the turbos have no oil, there's no oil around the engine. We'll have to disconnect the injectors to make sure no fueling gets into the engine in case it starts whilst we're turning it over, because what we're going to have to do is, we have to turn it over, let the oil pressure build up within the engine, let it circulate around the turbos and everything else. Then we can plug the injector plugs back in. Then we can try and start it. Because if you try and start it with no oil in it, it may fire up and then everything's running dry for the first few seconds, and you don't want that. So the front injectors are disconnected like you can see, but the rears you can't get to as it is. However, that plug there is what goes to the rear injector, so we'll just unplug that. We'll unplug that, and then when the engine tries to start up, none of the injectors will put fuel in the cylinders. But now most of the electrical connections are plugged in, we need to work on the more mechanical side of things, which is the heater matrix hoses on the back, they need to go in. The vacuum lines, they need to go in, and the shift cables. So we'll get all that plugged in now, and then we'll see what we need to do next. So now the shift cables are in, the next thing to do is the fuel lines here. So this one goes to the top. That is the fuel filter, which goes to this. So I think that's the incoming to the fuel rail at the top of the engine. Don't think you can see it. There it is there. And then when these are connected up, the next thing on the back is the heater matrix hoses. They go up the top. See if I can focus. There they are. And then they also go to the two pipes at the back. Then the Jubilee clips need tightening. And then that's them hoses on, and if we don't put them on now, once you fill the car up with coolant, it'll go all over the back of the engine because it won't have anywhere else to go out of those hoses.
Lose my breath whenever I see you. You stole my heart, what is it that you do? My life was great till you added colors.
One thing I don't understand about the UK is how it can be cracking the flags 1 minute and then absolutely lashing it down the next. But anyway, that's enough for the weather report. I think it's time to get the boost hoses on.
You just wanna be with you till we grow old. Please tell me you'll stay or take me away. I want you for myself every single day. You set my world on fire. You set my
Tell you what, there's a lot of hoses on that turbo system. I know it's a twin intercooler, but Jesus Christ. Also, it's going dark outside, so that took me ages. But there's the engine bay, it's looking pretty full to say the least. So obviously there's your intakes coming in into your throttle body and then all the way out to the intercooler on one side and the intercooler on another. The next thing will fit the oil cooler because that goes on this side. And if it don't fit that now, I'll forget. I'll fill the engine with oil, try and start it, and the oil will go everywhere. So let's get it on. And that is the oil cooler on and all bolted up. I've also lifted the GTO, so it's currently on axle stands again. But it's getting quite late and it's quite cold in the unit. So I think what we're gonna do next is probably just... It's also quite windy. We're gonna fill the engine with oil so don't forget to do it tomorrow. Give the place a clean because it is disgustingly dirty in here. The other side is exactly the same. But yeah, let's get some engine oil in the engine. I was going to fit the full exhaust before the first start, but it is getting dark and it is getting late, so I just want to get it started now, to be honest with you. So I think that's exactly what we're going to do next. Actually, I'll get the wheels on first and we'll get the car on the floor. Now that the car's down, the next thing we need to do is get a battery on it. I'm not going to put the battery in the car just in case anything happens. What I'll do is I'll connect it with a few jump leads. That way, if anything goes wrong, I can disconnect it quickly. Well, we have power. The fans have kicked in. Have a look on the inside. Yeah, everything's coming on. Well, that's why the fans are on. Let's turn this off. Let's turn the fans off. Here's the dash on. Dash is now on. Actually quite scared. Hopefully nothing blows up. We do need to build oil pressure in the engine first though, so we need to turn it over whilst the injectors are disconnected. Then we can put fuel in it. Then we can try and start it. Let's see if it turns over. Do it again just so we don't burn the starter out. Now I think for the first start we'll actually put the battery on just because I don't want to put that much stress through the jump leads, and
it's quite a big engine, so it takes a fair bit through the battery. So let's get that in and connected properly. So now we've got the battery in, I've reconnected the rear injector plug and I've connected the front 3 injectors. So all we need to do now is put fuel in the back and see if it starts. So now that the fuel tank's full of fuel, we need to turn the engine on to try and prime the pump. Again, the fan's come back on. I need to figure out why it keeps doing that. Turn that off. Doesn't sound like the fuel pump's going actually. So now after all these years, let's see if it starts. I don't know why, but it just wouldn't start. Well, that didn't work. Yeah, didn't start. But one thing I've noticed though, which is a bit odd because it should, when you put the key in the ignition, like so, and turn it on, you should hear a hum. And when you hear a hum, that usually means it's coming from the back, from the fuel pump. But I can't hear no hum, so I'm suspecting maybe the engine's not getting fuel because, well, if the pump's not on, it's not sending fuel to the front of the car. The engine's never going to start without petrol. So I'm thinking I might pull that cover off and see what's going on with the fuel pump. That's that off. Yes, the fuel pump does look a bit crusty, but I have gone through this and I've cleaned everything. And it's plugged in, so everything looks right here, so I don't think it's back here. But one thing I do know about the GTOs is there's a way to test the fuel pump in the engine bay. And the way you do that is with these down here. So if you have a GTO and you come to where your battery is, down in this corner here, you have these little plugs. I think the blue one is for ignition timing. The black one is what we want, that's to test your fuel pump. There's a brown one down there. I don't really know what it does. I might be getting that and the blue one confused. But I know for a fact we need the black one because that tests your fuel pump. So what you do is put a connector in there, take it straight to the 12 volt positive on the battery, and you should hear the pump hum in the boot. And that wire goes directly to the fuel pump from the engine bay. So if you don't hear the pump hum, we know the pump's dead. If you do hear the pump hum, we need to come further back to see why the pump isn't getting power when the ignition's turned on. So like I said, we'll get the black cable out. There's a little cover connector on the top, which is that's just plastic. We'll take that off. And then this is like a little tester cable I made to do windows on cars, you know, boot to 12, get it up. Anyway, get this in the front of the black connector. Then this goes directly to the battery positive. And if it works, we should hear a hum. Now I can hear a hum, which is good, but I don't think you can, so I'll put it in the boot and I'll show you. So you're at the back of the car now, I'll go do that cable and you'll hear it hum. Which is good, because that tells me the fuel pump's working. So in that case, we need to figure out why the fuel pump isn't getting sent 12 volts when the ignition turns on. There's only one place I can think of, oh no, I lied. There's two places where I can think that happens before it gets to the fuel pump. One of which is down there behind that trim, which is called your MFI relay or multi-fuel injection relay. And the other place, move me test wire out the way, is that little black box. That is your starter relay. So when you turn the car on, it goes through those pins and it tells the pump when it's running and when it's trying to prime. But I bought that starter relay off a running car, so I'm pretty confident that that's okay. So I don't think that's the issue. And right now, I don't really want to pull the carpets up to figure out why the MFI relay isn't going in. But what we can do is we'll send the 12 volts to the pump directly and we'll try and start the car. And if the engine starts, then maybe that's the issue. Actually, that's definitely the issue. The engine's not getting fuel and we know that. Let's use the little wire, jump the fuel pump, see if it starts, and hopefully we don't cause a fire. So get that in there. For safety, I'm going to use jump leads because I need to leave it on. So get the jump lead on the 12 volt for the battery, jump lead on this, and hear the fuel pump priming. Let's go turn the ignition on. Moment of truth. Ooh. Try again. Why is it coming in then? Last chance. So the engine's starting. Sounds pretty strong, but it's not staying on. Now the only thing I can think of is that relay is a changeover relay. So what that means is it primes the engine by turning the fuel pump on when the key's turned on, but then after that it switches over and tells the engine you're running, pump the fuel properly. But I bought that relay off a running car and I knew the car was running. That's why I bought the relay. The only thing I can think of is when I first picked this car up, it would not start, and it was that relay, funnily enough. But, ooh, I might still have it. So, just for context, in here is all my GTO crap. It's all the bolts and everything I've got spare. And there it is. I made this little jump lead and I used it to jump that starter relay. So I suppose we've got nothing to lose by doing the same thing on this, and hopefully that might keep it running. But I know last time it was a bit dodgy, so if it does run, I'm not going to run it for long. But might as well try. Last time was, let me just pull that off. There's the relay. They do look a bit crusty actually. Anyway, there's the relay, that's the plug. What I did was those top and bottom pins, I jumped them with this little jumper, and you can see by the arc in it kind of still fits. Let's try and get it on. Like that. So I jumped it like that, and that managed to get the car to run and to stay running. So I'll get it back on the stand. I'll do the same thing with the fuel pump wire in. See if it starts. I mean, it sounded pretty strong initially anyway, which I made up with because it hasn't gone boom yet. But if this doesn't work, the next thing we'll check, or we would have to check, is the MFI relay, and that's on the inside of the car. And I've got to pull all the carpets up, so I kind of hope it's this. That's plugged in. That is now plugged in. The fuel pump's going. 3, 2, 1. No. Now it's not starting at all. Let me check that jumper. Oh, it's the two outer ones, the bigger ones I think I jumped last time. Try that. So the fuel pump's going again. 3, 2, 1, 1. So it must be that start relay that's causing the issues. I now need to get another one. But I don't know if you saw then, when I pulled the key out the ignition, the engine was still running, and I think that's because that relay is still sending power to the fueling system, which is keeping the car on, which means it's still gonna run, but it starts. So the past 3 years of rebuilding this car and the past year of rebuilding that engine all led up to this point. And yes, the starter relay did kind of mess it up a little bit, but it runs and it sounds fantastic. So I can't wait to get the exhaust on, run it properly, and eventually take it for the first drive. And although that engine bay is absolutely crammed, that sounds to me like we put everything back in the right place and everything starts as it should, minus that stupid starter relay. But I'll give you one more start because 1, I want to hear it myself, and 2, I'll let it run for a little bit longer. We can't run it to temp because there's no coolant in it, but we'll run it for a little bit longer just to see if everything still sounds healthy. I'm over the moon with that. Let's start again. this year I'm going to Jaff Fest. And I am fortunate enough to actually own a 90s Japanese sports car, which you'll all know is the Mitsubishi GTO. So I was thinking about it and I thought, if I'm going to Jaff Fest, it only makes sense to turn up to Jaff Fest in a Japanese car. And I had every intention of entering this Mitsubishi GTO as a show car down at Jaff Fest. But unfortunately, I had that idea a little too late and I already missed the application process. And even though I'm not taking it to be a show car, it still makes sense to take the GTO, but as you can see, there's a bit of an issue. And today is the 15th of March, meaning I've got less than a month to get this GTO finished, because Jaff Fest is on the 13th of April, and I've got to get down there on the 12th. I've also got to get it aligned, MOT'd, and finished well before then. And although it looks like there's everything in the engine bay, and yes, it kind of is, those of you who've seen the last video on the GTO in the top right hand corner now, you'll know there's still a fair few issues with this car. So to make things easier for myself and so you can actually see what it is I'm doing, I'm going to take the bonnet off the GTO. And although I made that look easy, this bonnet weighs a ton. So now the bonnet's off, the next thing I need to do is remove all the boost intake pipes along with the coolant pipes, because I've got a bit of a coolant leak, and while everything's off it makes sense to fix it now instead of putting it all back together and then taking it all off again. So looking at this now, to get it off, I think what I need to do is disconnect all of these electrical connectors there, because you can see down the back end of that silver there's the 2 bolts I need to get to. Bit crap to see on camera, but them 3 need to come off. I'm probably going to have to take the injector plugs off because the loom wraps around just in front of it. That's the same for the sensors on the top of the planning, which do with the rear injectors and a few other bits, and the throttle position sensor and the cam angle sensor, that needs to come out. I might even move these out the way. The only plug in there, that's not that hard. Then it'll be a case of taking the shift cable bracket off just to give me a bit more space underneath, along with the vacuum line bracket there. That might need to come off, unfortunately. Then the fuel rail, then the fuel supply line, I think that'll need to come off as well. I tell you what, it's just getting worse every time I look at it now. Then there's the turbo coolant lines, that's what these are. That top one there and the little one at the back underneath, that one there. Then this is a heater matrix hose which goes straight to there on the firewall, so they'll need to come off. And with it being the central location for the coolant system, I think it's probably where the most things come out of, and unfortunately I've got to take it off, so it's a case of cracking on, because all that needs to come off. Then I need to seal it, then I need to get it back on, then I need to make sure it isn't leaking, and hopefully it holds coolant. But I'm going to struggle with this, and I'll come back to you when everything's disconnected. So now we're at a point where everything's off, and I think the thermostat housing is actually ready to come off, because like you can see here, this is the perfect example. I took all the coil packs and stuff off. The lead comes out and goes into the top of the head. There's a bolt there, a bolt underneath. That then runs off to the front turbo coolant lines, and then that is the return. And it's the same on the backside for the rear turbo. And down the bottom, you've got your heater matrix ones. They go off to the heater matrix and back. And then here you've got your throttle body coolant line, so then the coolant line runs up through the throttle body and back down. There's 2 on this side. Now from here underneath, the pipe is just behind at the back, so we should be able to pull this off. Coolant will go everywhere, but I can get to the pipe, get to the O-ring, reseal it, and hopefully not have any coolant leaks when it's all back together. There it is, it's all off. There's coolant everywhere, like I said, but the good thing is you can see what it is I was actually trying to get to. So this is the crossover pipe. Mine's a bit crusty. Yeah, it's not great really, but the seal on the top, I don't know if you can see, I'll try and get parallel to it. The seal on the top actually doesn't sit much above the head. So that seal probably hasn't been doing anything really, and the coolant's just been dripping out the bottom, dripping down here. And that's what's been causing the coolant leak initially anyway. Because the other thing as well is the thermostat housing to the heads have 2 gaskets. Now I've took that off, I'm going to have to replace the gaskets because I've disturbed them. And I hate doing any job that requires re-gaskets or re-sealers, because chances are when you get it together it probably won't seal. He says after rebuilding the full engine, I know, but that's part of the reason why. Luckily enough the engine itself doesn't seem to leak, but the coolant lines do. And this is the thermostat housing, and you can kind of see on the bottom there where the coolant's been dripping out, because it's got a big puddle on it. But these seem to be fairly clean, so I think the culprit was that. I've got 2 seals, so I'll get that in. And while I'm here, I'll actually take that bolt out and that bolt, pull the pipe out, and I'll put a new O-ring on the opposite side where the water pump is. You can just make it out down the back, because if I'm in here doing this once, I don't want to be in a position where I've got to do it again to do the other side, because then I'll have to do them both regardless, so I might as well do them both now. So that's the water tube out. You can see the inside of the engine is full of coolant, so I'm going to have to dry that out somehow, but this is the reason why I had to take this off. So it sits in that way. That seal there is one that came with the engine rebuild kit when I changed the water pump, so I know that's definitely right. You can see the height is a little bit bigger than the collar on the pipe, but this side isn't. This side's one I stuck in that I had thinking it might be enough to seal, but quite clearly not, because with the pipe going in this way, you can see on the bottom there's evidential marks of where the leak was. You can see a little rusty drip. So when it was in like that, the coolant was dripping down onto the gearbox, down from there, and as it pressurised, it was pushing it out a lot faster. And that was what was causing me coolant leak. So what I've done is, I've visited Jaff Fest's eBay site again, because I didn't know he sold these, and I've bought 2 perfectly sized water tube seals, so I can replace both that side, and they're exactly the right size the manufacturer recommends for that pipe. And if you do it properly, that means no more leaks.
So the first thing to do is to remove the old O-rings, because they didn't really work. Now I'm going to grease up the new O-rings before I put them on, just so they go on a bit easier and there's less of a chance of them getting ripped. Now I can fit them onto the water crossover tube and reinstall the water crossover tube back onto the engine.
So that's the water tube back in, as you've just seen there, and now I need to get the thermostat housing back in. But before I do that, there is another big job we need to do within the engine bay, and that is the ABS delete. So through looking at this logically, to make my life a lot easier, your proportional valve for the brakes is right at the back. You see that thing right there? That's for the brake lines. And while I've got the thermostat housing off, I've actually got a fair bit of good access to get to that prop valve. But if I stick it back on, all this space will be full again, and I can't get down the back to that. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is take the reservoir lid off, drain the reservoir, go down the back, disconnect that prop valve and take off all the brake lines. And as you can see where they follow it round, I need to then go through and decipher what lines are what. They are labelled, luckily enough, on the ABS pump. But all of this will be coming out. I'll have one line going to there for this front corner, and the rest will be going straight to the back over there. So all this will be gone. I'm thinking if I do it cleverly, I can actually reuse some of the old lines and cut them shorter, because they don't need to be that long anymore. If not, I've got new lines, so I can make up some new brake lines. But anyway, that's going to be the next job, because that's going to be a pain, and while I've got the access, it just makes sense. And for those of you who don't know what a prop valve is, that is this. This is actually off a Mitsubishi FTO, but the GTO did come with a non-ABS version, which kind of had a similar thing to this, but all this does is, as you can see in the middle, there's a line. That is 2 separate valves. One will be the rear right, one will be the front left. That'll be the rear left, and that'll be the front right. And these 2 will be your main incoming from the brake booster over there, which on this are on the front. So the fluid pressure comes in from here through the front. The pump then distributes it through those lines to whatever corner needs it most, based on the speed the wheels are rotating. And that is basically a crash course into an ABS. This gets rid of it, this fixes me leak, and this gives me brakes, because that definitely doesn't work. So I'm going to now drain that reservoir and crack on tackling these brakes. So that's the ABS pump off, and it absolutely killed me to cut the brake lines that I'd made up to make it all nice and fancy so I could keep it, but if it doesn't work, it's pointless. But now that the ABS pump's off, and you might have seen within the time lapse that I've actually labelled the hoses, so I know where left is, front left, front right, rear right, and then the 2 incoming lines, the power lines, I'll have to trace back from the brake booster because I'm not sure what ones go where, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. But now the pump's off, the next thing for me to do is to try and get to that prop valve down the back, and as you can see, access to recording it isn't actually that easy, but all I'm going to do is, if I let the camera focus, is on the prop valve, you've got one on the top, one on the bottom, one on the top, one on the bottom on the other side, and then a big bolt in the middle. I just need to take them hoses off, take that bolt out, pull that out, and then from there, I think the only lines I can keep are the top left and right, because they're for the rear of the car, so they come under the car up and then to the top of that prop valve, and they stay where they are, luckily enough. But I'm going to get that out and come back to you when I have, because it's not an easy job to record because of access. So yeah, see you in a bit. And I'm back. Finally got the prop valve out. Like I said, it wasn't an easy job, but I've just had a realisation. So there's the original prop valve, the one covered in brake fluid, and I've realised this prop is only for the rear brakes. So one comes from the ABS and one goes to the rear brakes, the other way around. So in theory, instead of putting this one in, which is the fronts and the rears, I could have just left that one in, which only does the rears, and then up here where the ABS pump is, I could have fitted that prop valve where the ABS pump was and just had all the lines running to where they're supposed to on that prop. But I like to do things as proper as I can, so I don't mind sticking it on the firewall and doing that bit of extra work just to make it look nice as well. But the only reason I'm telling you is if you're in a pinch, I might be wrong, so I don't recommend you do it at home, but if it is right, you could take the ABS off, stick that in its place, and technically your brakes then have an ABS delete without having to go through all the faff of taking everything off and bashing your knuckles trying to get to that prop valve. But anyway, that's enough of the if, buts and maybes. One thing I do know for a fact is down there where the prop valve was, I now need to get the new one in and then figure out how I'm going to route these brake lines around, because one of these lines already goes to that side under all this mess, so I'm reluctant to try and pull that out. So I'm going to try and find where this goes to and splice into it down there so I can just put it straight into the prop valve. The two on the top, like I said, there for the rears, they can stay as they are, that is fine. Then the other two here, I need to find out which go where is the supply lines to the ABS, which will then go into the front of the prop valve, and they come from here. So on the brake booster you've got the front, and down there you've got one on the side. That's those two, so I need to figure that out as well. And then I also need to make a new line for the front right, because that just came straight from the ABS pump and now it's got to go all the way back to the firewall.
So now I'm just removing the two redundant brake lines because I've got rid of the ABS pump, and I'm going to trace through the power lines going to the ABS pump down the back of the firewall to see where they go to, so I know where to cut into them.
So as you can see, like you've just seen down there, that is the new prop on. I say new, it's brand new second hand, but it's been wire brushed and painted. So that is the rear right. That is the front left on the bottom. That is the rear left. So that will be the front right, which is the one I need to make up. Then these two will be from the master cylinder. So I think that one is the front of the master cylinder and that one is the side of the master cylinder. So now I've got a bit more investigation work to do, because from the brake lines I took off the ABS pump down here, these two both come from the master cylinder, and I need to figure out which one's from the side and which one's from the front. So I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to do that yet, but these go all the way down, right down through the bottom. See them running over the top, and then they go down to there. So I'm going to cut them there, splice into them with new nuts, then I can bring them round and into the front of the prop. I just need to know what's what so I know where to put it, and then I can make the whole new line for this one that goes in here, because that was the front right, but you can see it's a bit short. So see you in two. It's now 2 hours later and I've finally got the brake booster pipes in on the prop valve, and it took me a whole 2 hours, but that's the setup so far. I think it's looking okay. The only thing left is the front right one to go in that corner there. Got to bring it round and then into this hole. And I think for this I'm actually going to just make up a whole new line instead of recycling what I've got, because I've got the stuff to do it, so I might as well do it.
So when you're making up new brake lines, the brake line tends to come in a reel of copper pipe like this. So you've got to straighten it out, cut it to a rough length of what it is I'm going to need. Then I'm going to need to flare the ends out with a nut to make sure that when the brake line actually bolts up to the prop valve, this flared end properly seats to the inside and seals the line. And that's what a good flare looks like. Now I've made the end off and put a nut on, the next thing I want to do is put some industrial heat shrink with glue on the inside around the brake line. So the glue on the inside of the heat shrink, as you heat it up and it shrinks, the glue then sticks to the brake line and helps to seal it from letting any water get in or anything else. And not only does this heat shrink offer mechanical protection from anything knocking into it, but I think it looks quite nice.
Now the last thing I need to do is to get the pipe in, and to do that I need to bend it around everything it needs to avoid, to get it as close to the prop valve as I can so I can screw that one side in, keep bending the pipe around to get it to all the contours and as close to the brake line mounting points as I can. Then after that I can get it into the front wheel arch where it needs to go, and once it's in the wheel arch I can flare the other end off with a nut, and then I can bolt that to the flex pipe that then goes to the caliper, and that's the brake line installed. And this is it. That was the last little thing I needed to do. You can see the line coming in there just nicely into the actual brakes. Then it comes up all the way through, right down the back, and then to the prop valve. And based on the piping setup, I think everything's right. Just need to bleed the brakes and make sure it doesn't leak, but I think I'll be okay. Now that the ABS delete is done and we don't need the access anymore, I can put the thermostat housing and all the cooling stuff back together, and then when that's done, hopefully that doesn't leak either. Because as you can see, there's a big hole waiting for a load of parts. So because all of that is kind of just the board and stuff, for plugging stuff back in and bolting it together basically, I'm going to crack on with that. My phone's about to die, so I need to put that in charge, but I'll come back to you when we're filling it with coolant, we're bleeding the brakes, and we're testing for any leaks. So, 3, 2, 1, and boom, everything's back on the engine in terms of the thermostat housing, the pipes, the cables, all the HT leads, all that. The only thing missing still is the boost pipes, as you can see, because there's a big hole. But there's a reason I've left them off for now, because I need to bleed the brakes, and if I put the boost pipes on, I won't be able to see that prop valve to see if it's leaking. I hate when you've got to mess with brake fluid on a car. Because it was going well until I realised when I was under the car, I heard dripping and there was brake fluid all over the floor. Must have dumped about 50 quid's worth of brake fluid trying to bleed the brakes up on this stupid GTO. Because no matter what I try, I just cannot get a good seal on that reservoir to pressure bleed it. So I'm going to have to do it the old fashioned way and have someone in the driver's seat bumping the brake while I bleed it from the caliper. So, gonna get someone in, gonna get the pedal pressed, I'm gonna bleed the brakes, and I'll come back to you when they're done, because this is doing my head in. And not only that, but brake fluid is highly corrosive, so everything that's down there where it's stripped on, I'm gonna have to try and clean. But anyway, I'll see you in a bit. So, brakes are done, the reservoir is full, and we seem to have good pedal pressure. Next thing is to fill the coolant so we can make sure that thermostat housing isn't leaking before we get everything back on and try to start the engine. And the reason I say try is because if you watched that video when we very first got the engine in the GTO, you'll have seen that to get the engine to start, I had to give a constant 12 volt supply to the fuel pump in the back, because the ECU and the relays didn't actually send the voltage to the pump to tell it to turn on when you were turning the key to try and start the engine. And I've got a sneaky suspicion that it's down to the ECU. Because when you turn the key to start in the GTO, that ECU is then what decides to send the voltage to the fuel pump to tell it to turn on, to tell it to then try and start the engine. And I think my ECU is faulty. But the good thing is, I scoured the internet and found another second-hand ECU with the same part number. And hopefully this works, because I haven't tested it yet, but it was advertised as fully working. So now I need to just unplug the old ECU with these yellow connectors. So that's the old one out, the new one in, and hopefully that makes a difference. So now the next thing before I actually try and start the car is, you need to get all those boost pipes back on and the battery back in, because you're not going to start the car without the battery. So I get all that done now. So all the boost pipes are back in. I haven't put the battery in yet. I've also put the screen wash filler neck and the battery tray in, because that's where the battery needs to sit. But now that all the boost pipes are in, the MAF sensor is the next thing to go in. And as you'll have seen in the start of the video, I've also got a stock air box. And I've managed to get myself, in that blueprint box there, a stock air filter to go in the stock air box. And this is the stock air box, so I'm pretty sure it just sits on that stud there, that bolt hole, that bolt hole. And this little snorkel goes down there under the fuse box, so it just slots in like that. I say just slots in, obviously it's not as easy, but I need to get that in, sit it there, and have the MAF sensor between that and the intake. So this is it. This is the most together this engine has ever been since I've owned this car. And now that's got an air filter, the MAF sensor's all plugged back in, the battery's in, all the boost pipes are back in. It's got deionized water in it as coolant for now, and the brakes have been bled and pressurized. I think it's only right we try and start it. And hopefully this new second-hand ECU will actually let me start it without having to put power directly to the fuel pump. Fingers crossed. So this is it. The only thing left to do now is hope it actually starts on the key. 3, 2, 1. No. Well, it didn't start, and I've just went into the car. This is the second-hand, brand new second-hand. Don't know if you can see it. The ECU is smoking. It was quite bad when it was in the car, and it still is there, and it absolutely stinks. So that's I think I'll open this up and see what's going on, but this is getting sent back. So I've opened it up, and going through the ECU, it's one of them. I don't even know what that is, but as you can see, it's pretty burnt. Done a number on the board behind it. I haven't got a clue what has caused that. Next to R55. So I've done a bit of digging, and I think those black boards are internal current controllers, meaning it's had too many amps go through it, and that's what's caused it to pop or burn. I've now started to try and dig a bit further in, and this is the fuse board. Split it down, it's all in layers, but there's a fair bit of corrosion on the bottom side of most of these layers, which kind of makes sense because when I got this GTO, the top corner of the windscreen here, it had peeled away. There was a fair bit of rust, and all the water had gone down the A-pillar and then into that fuse box, so that's probably done the fuse box in as well. And I did split this once upon a time to clean it, but I mustn't have done a good enough job because I feel like there's still a fair few contacts that have got a fair bit of corrosion still on them, so they need another good scrub. So I've now rebuilt that fuse board, and there's been a development because there was something else that I found that could have been the fault. Because under the dash where the fuse board was, there's these two connectors. Don't know if you can make them out. Sorry, there's three there. So there's that one, the little one, and then there's a bigger one as well. But anyway, those dash connectors had a fair bit of green copper corrosion on them, means the copper's oxidized because it's got water in it, which is probably also from when the leak was in that top of the windscreen. So I cleaned them off, scratched them pins out, rebuilt the fuse board, got that back in. All that seems to be okay and plugged in now. So the only thing I really need to do now is put fuel in it, because I know for a fact it has run out of fuel because it's empty. So I've just ran down to the nearest Shell and got 10 litres of V-Power, so I'm going to throw that back in the car. I've also come to the front and I've took that jumper off so I can put the proper relay in, that silver one there, or grey should I say. And then there is no 12 volt going to the fuel pump test lead either, so all of this is how it should be if you were to start the car from the key from the factory. And I'm hoping finding those corroded connectors will actually make a difference, because those connectors come from the dash, and I think they also interlink with the key switch, what's it called? The ignition barrel, because that also affects the fuel system. But anyway, I'm rambling. Let's fill the GTO up, turn the key, and see if it starts on its own without the jumpers. So that's 10 litres of fuel. Let's see what it equates to on the dash. So get the key in. And the needle's barely even moved. I'm pretty sure on these GTOs it's actually a 90 litre tank, which I don't think 10 litres is going to touch the side on the fuel gauge. But the important thing is, now the fuel's in, let's see if it'll actually start after everything I've done today. And just to reiterate as proof, the jumper is there. So the starter, the fuel pump relay is in. There's no 12 volt going to anything in terms of the fuel pump. So if this starts now, that means what I did to the fuse box in terms of stripping it down, cleaning off all the corrosion, and the same with the dashboard connectors has actually made a difference. But after everything else I've tried, I'm not hopeful to, well, I'm hopeful, but I'm not confident. So whether I'm confident or not is irrelevant, because it's all down to what happens when it's in the key. So for the last time, let's see if this works or not, because if not, I've got a lot more research to do and a lot more digging. So, keys in the ignition. 3, 2, 1. Yes! First time. That's with the first turn of the key, and she's ticking over fantastically. As you can see out the back, spat out a lot of condensation, but there's next to no smoke, and it sounds fantastic. Yes, I didn't think that would work because I've tried everything else, and I think all it come down to in the end was a corroded connector and a dodgy fuse box. But I've done that, changed all the fuses in the fuse box. I know it wasn't the fuses before, someone says it was that, but there you go. If your connectors are green, it's not going to work. But that's the GTO running off the key for the first time since I've owned it in the past, what, 3 years, no, 2021, the past 4 years I've been trying to fix that fault, and I've finally done it. And let's see what it does when we rev it. I'm so happy. Yes! But anyway, let's turn it off because you probably won't be able to hear me. But like I said, I've had this car since 2021 and that has never started on the key. Well, it didn't even really start when I first got the car. But once again, that is a huge milestone in the restoration of this GTO because now it turns on the key. I haven't got to mess around with any jumpers or anything like that. And mechanically, there's only one thing left that I can think of doing, which I'm going to do in a future video, and that's put the cars on coilovers. I've got the coilovers and I'm ready to do it. I just haven't done it yet because I needed to make sure everything worked mechanically in terms of starting it first. And now that I know mechanically everything turns on in the engine, it starts when I want it to, it turns off when I want it to, and it runs how I want it to. That means the road to Jaff Fest and the preparations to take it there are actually looking quite positive, which is good. So now realistically, once I've fitted the coilovers, the only thing I need to do after that is get the bumpers on, do all the aesthetic stuff, fit the interior, which shouldn't be too hard, hopefully. And then I've got to take a stab at wrapping it because the paint, it's blue, it's black, it's red, the paint's not great. I've got the wrap. And you never know, you might as well give it a go, and that's the only way you can learn, and that's the only way I'll know if I can wrap a car or not. And the other thing is wheels. I do have these Rotor P45s on, but I have gone and bought another set of alloys for the GTO that I think will look a lot nicer on it, and they're already the colour I actually want to spray them. I'm gonna try something I've never done before, and that is to wrap a full car, because I've never wrapped a car. I have wrapped little interior bits like the TT in that video, but I've never done a full car, so this is going to be a learning curve. And I've only really got one chance to get it right, because if I mess it up on this, I won't have time to order more wrap to get it on before we go to Jaff Fest. And speaking of wrap, this is the wrap I've got for the GTO, and as you can see by the box, I've had this for a very long time, so I don't even know if I can reuse it, but I'll give it a good go, and it's this.
And this wrap is from Vinyl Frog, and it's called Glossy Metallic Vampire Red.
But anyway, I've never wrapped a car before. I'm about to give it a go. You're going to watch me and probably laugh because I'll get it wrong. But the first thing I need to do is take all these panels off and start prepping everything so I can wrap the main shell, get that back on, wrap all the other bits and crack on from there. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to wing it.
So when doing my research on wrapping a car, one of the biggest things that stood out to me was everyone was disassembling the car to get the best finish, because I think if you take the panels off, it's easier to tuck the wrap neatly underneath all the panels that go over the top, instead of trying to just cram it in between the gaps, because it just makes things a bit more difficult. And the finish doesn't really go that well, so disassembling the car, taking everything off that could possibly be an issue, because they also need to be wrapped. And then this hopefully will make my life a little bit easier, with this being my first time. And whilst I'm ripping all these panels off the GTO ready to throw a nice red wrap on it, why don't you jump down below and hit that subscribe button and really help me out. The channel's just hit 5,000 subscribers and I couldn't be more grateful. So let's try and grow it and get a little bit more and push for unrealistic goals. Maybe go for 10,000 by Christmas, but you know, one can only wish. And if you use social media, go give me a follow on Instagram, because I post a load of little updates on the GTO, the TT, the Porsche when I get back round to it. I post them all on there before YouTube, so if you want to stay up to date in real time, go give me a follow. And if you want to speak to me, by all means send me a DM. I always reply to them. It may take a little bit of time, but I'll always reply to a message, especially if it's someone who's subscribed to the channel and genuinely enjoys the videos and what I post. So now that the GTO's being disassembled once again, it's time to try my hand at wrapping the boot. The reason I've gone for the boot first is it's a relatively flat panel, so hopefully if I'm going to learn anything or make any mistakes, it's easier to do it on the flat surface as opposed to trying to cut around different contours and stretching the wrap and overstretching it or damaging it or even ruining it, because I'm on a tight deadline, and if I ruin this wrap I'm done for because I haven't got any spares. So from my research, one thing I did read up is the vinyl wrap relies heavily on the surface being clean, oil free, silicone free, grease free. Long story short, it's a big sticker and it needs to make sure it sticks to the surface properly. So for that, I'm going to go around and degrease everything first. Then after that, I can dry it off, make sure there's no dust on the panel and get ready to lay the wrap down. The one thing I would say was quite difficult when wrapping the boot is the contour that goes down and into the rear windscreen, because you can see there's a little bit of a dip. I don't know if it's like a water runoff or a styling design from Mitsubishi, but because of that it was quite difficult to get the wrap in there properly and make sure it actually sticks, because with it being stretched and wanting to pull back, it can always pop back up and you get bubbles underneath it and the finish doesn't look great. But I'm literally just lifting the wrap, repositioning it as best I can, trying to use as little heat as possible, and then when I get round the edges I'll use a bit more heat to try and kill the memory of the wrap and hopefully it stays stuck down.
My next bit is going to be the rear quarter, because that's quite a big piece and it's relatively smooth, but I think that's going to take the longest, because not only is it all curvy on the edges and stuff, but you have that recess here, and I think this recess is going to be one of the harder pieces to do, purely because when it comes up and over into the recess, then on this corner I need to wrap it down and across, and it looks a bit daunting, but if I give myself enough time I should be alright with it. So I'm going to crack on, stick on a time lapse, and I'll see you in a bit.
Now for the rear quarter. This is a relatively large panel, so I'm going to use magnets just to hold the wrap up so it's not flopping everywhere. But because the rear quarter, luckily enough on the GTO, is, although it's curvy, it's relatively flat as well, so I can get the wrap down on the flatter parts and then I can use the curves with a bit of heat to pull it round just to get it to all fit in properly, smooth it all off and just make sure it goes down nice and soft. On the window I'll put some masking tape around the rubber trims. That's because masking tape inherently stops things from sticking to it, like paint or whatever else. So if you stick masking tape around the rubber, the wrap won't stick to the tape, and then I can reposition it where I need to without having to pull it up from the window as well. It also helps when it comes to tucking it under the window, because the wrap will just slide over the masking tape and go into the contours where it needed to go. Now after all the pulling, heating, stretching and repositioning, the wrap has gone down and I'm made up with how it's come out, because I think it's going quite well.
And because there's a lot more little things to wrap, I'm going to crack on. I'll come back to you when I've got a fair few more panels wrapped. I think you get the idea of it by now, and there's a lot to do.
So these door panels from factory, when the grommets are pressed in, the grommets have a seal on, so no water can get in or anything from the outside world can get inside the door. The seals I've got on the grommets that I've managed to get from Jaff Fest, as you'd imagine, are degraded, not going to work, so a bit naughty, but I've decided to put some tiger seal around the hole when I push the grommets in, just so it seals it, and I'm hoping I never have to take this panel back off, because if I do, I'm probably going to struggle, but if it works, it works. Next is around the edge of the door trim, because around the edge it's supposed to have some form of a 3M tape or double-sided sticky foam tape, whatever it is. I don't have any, so what I've done is I've cut all the old crusty foam tape off, I've given it a good clean, and I've just gone around the entire edge with some sealant, again to prevent water ingress and to keep the panel on the door, because the last thing I want going down the motorway is for this panel to fly off, because not only have I lost the panel, but it could hit another car and then I'd feel terrible. Now the last thing to do is to press the wrap panel back in, making sure all the pins line up with the grommets, and when they're in, give it a good squash to get the sealant to spread out, to glue the panel to the door properly, and then on the back there's two nuts, stick them on, tape it down until the sealant dries, and that is that done.
So this is it, kind of. So the last clip you saw me do was the door trim panel thing, so that's now on. The rest of the car is as good as finished. The only thing I haven't done yet is the rear bumper, so I still need to do that, but it's the day before Jaff Fest, the sun's shining, and it'd be an absolute waste if I didn't show you the GTO in this light, because I think it looks fantastic. So here it is, here's the GTO in the light, and like I said, it would have been an absolute waste to not show you the car like this with the sunlight as it's slowly going down, because this wrap is fantastic. I love the way it looks, I love the way the light bounces off it, and I like how it changes as you go around it, and you catch it in different lights. Even when you come to the back on the combat wing, you can see the carbon fibre on the spoiler just pops, and it breaks that red up nicely, so I'm made up with the way it looks. I need to get the rear bumper finished. And there it is. It's now 7 o'clock the day after. I've managed to get the bumper done, managed to get it on coilovers, and I've managed to get the alloys on. And I'm made up with the way it looks. So without further ado, here is the GTO. This is it. There is the GTO, and you can see it's on the coilovers. It's got a really nice fitment, and I've got these bronze rotor grid alloys. The rears are 10 inches wide, which I didn't know until I bought it, but these are 18s by 10. The front are 18s by 8.5, and considering that a 10-inch wide wheel, I've put max camber on so you can see the wheels proper tucked, because it's the only way I can run it without it hitting the arch, but it doesn't even look that bad. And it's took me 4 years almost to get the car to this point, and I'm so glad as a project I stuck with it, because I think it looks amazing, and you just don't build cars like that anymore. It's got such a nice character to it, it's got style, and it's got its own personality, which is the biggest thing for me. But this is it. This is where hopefully everything I've done has been worth it, and this car gets me down to Jaff Fest in one piece with no breakdowns. I really hope it doesn't break down, because this car's a pain to work on at the best of time when you have all the right tools, never mind at the side of the road. But anyway, it's 7:30. I've got to get down to Silverstone before 10 o'clock. It's going to take me 2.5 hours, so I'm cutting it fine. So I need to get down there, get the tent up, go to sleep, get up early, and then go to Jaff Fest. So you'll see me driving down, but then I'll see you in the morning. So this is it. This is the first drive I've ever done in this car, and if it's gonna fail, it's probably gonna be now. But I really hope it doesn't. This was such a nerve-wracking yet exciting moment for me, because it took 4 years to get to here, and to take it to a Japanese car show for the first ever drive, I think is quite a cool experience. But as you can see, we were still driving down there in the dark. We never actually got to Silverstone until 11 PM. But luckily enough, the campsite was happy enough to let us in. It just meant putting the tent up in the dark. But considering we put the tent up in the dark, I don't think we did that bad a job. But it's now time to jump in the GTO and make our way to Jaff Fest. For a car that's 32 years of age and has been completely stripped down and rebuilt by me, it actually drove a lot better than I expected it to. And considering this is the first engine I've ever rebuilt from the ground up, it's running fantastic. One good thing is fitting these tiny coilovers has made the GTO feel quite planted when it comes to potholes. It can be quite stiff and it does hurt a little bit. But we've made it through all the bumpy country lanes, and here it is, the entrance to the car park for Jaff Fest. There it is. Right then. Let's get it unlocked. Even got myself a little jet tag while I was in there, which is quite cool. There we go. Tell you what, one thing I must admit is the GTO looks really nice with the, in the rain, you know, with the wrap. Because the water's beading up as if it's being polished, even though it's just plastic. I think it looks great. And then let's see if it starts. Ooh, just about. Come here, lad. So now it's time to make our way back to the campsite, and on our way back to the campsite we noticed there were a lot, and I mean a lot, of undercover police cars trying to catch people sending it once you've left Jaff Fest, because everyone's in high spirits and they're excited, and sometimes you get a bit carried away. There's it, back down the campsite. You can see all the other tents have actually disappeared because people only really came for the one night, so we need to get that tent down in the back of the GTO and start making our way home.
So now you can sit there and watch me struggle putting the tent away. Well, that's everything unpacked. Let's get on the road. I know it's only a car show, but this has been one of those experiences I know I'll never forget because it's the first drive I've done in the first car I've ever rebuilt, and I don't think it could have gone any better. I've enjoyed every minute of this trip, and I think it's been a little bit tiring for one of us.
Coming out the services now, and that is a lovely sight to see in the corner. Not those two idiots, the GTO.
Hasn't blew up yet. Routine oil check, that's all.
Yeah, look at that. Just under the max.
Yeah, I didn't know they did metallic oil.
I'll have to check again now.
It's like laughing page.
Nah, there's no glitter in that, we're all good.
For now.
What do you mean for now?
You have little feet. You said I never have much more feet than this. Come on, get in the car and go.
And we're back, and the GTO made it here, and there was no issues whatsoever. I'm so proud of this car. But I've come back to the unit, and I've just realised there's a lot to clean up. Because as you'll have seen in the last video, I had to do my best to rush to get this car finished for Jaff Fest. And I did do it, but at the expense of the unit cleanliness. So all of this needs to be cleaned. And no one's going to do it apart from me. So that was Jaff Fest. That was my first time at an actual car show, and I absolutely loved it. Like I said, I'm incredibly proud of this car and everything I've managed to do to it. This is the first time I've ever stripped the car down, I've ever worked on a car, I've ever rebuilt a car, wrapped the car. Everything I've done on this car, it was the first time I've ever done it. It's a learning curve, it's taught me a lot, and I'm happy I did. I'm glad I did, and I'm very proud of it. And that is how I've saved my 1992 Mitsubishi GTO Twin Turbo. To some people, it's just an old Japanese sports car that was destined for the scrapyard, but not to me. To me, this car's got a story to tell, and you've just seen that. And since fixing it and finishing it all off, it's brought me so much joy. Yes, it's also tested my patience and made me question my life choices on a few occasions, but I wouldn't change what it's taken to get to this point for anything, because I've learned a lot of new skills, it's taught me a lot of lessons, and I've also met a lot of new people who I would never have met if it weren't for this, who have similar interests to me, and that just shows how it's opened up many other opportunities for me. Like YouTube, I would never have made my first YouTube video if I didn't decide to take on the mammoth task of saving this car, and I'm so glad I did it. And every time I look at this car, I jump in and drive it. It's a reminder that if you just give something a go, you try your hardest and you believe in yourself, you can eventually achieve what it is you've set out to do. So that's the complete story of the Mitsubishi GTO. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. And if you like what you've seen today, remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notifications bell so you get an update every time I post a video, and I'll see you in the next one.